Hey guys, tonight we're unraveling the ancient wardrobe secrets of Rome, where politics, power, and polyester-free fashion collided under the Mediterranean sun. You're standing on a chilly stone floor, early morning haze wrapping around your sandals. A slave silently hands you a neatly folded mass of creamy wool. It's your toga, 7 meters of social pressure. You sigh. You know this thing is going to itch. You also know you'll be judged by every fold. That's life as a Roman senator. Even in this dim light, you can feel the eyes of the Republic. Being a senator means more than just giving speeches and casting votes. It means wearing your role, literally. The toga isn't optional. It's regulation, reputation, and resume in a single swaddle. And if you get it wrong, well, let's just say the Romans didn't have a casual Friday policy. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time it is where you are right now. I love seeing where this little bedtime club reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You reach for the toga again. It's heavy like history itself. You hoist it over your shoulder first. Try never works. You try again, and this time the fold sits right across your chest, giving you that slightly puffed up ceremonial look. You glance in the polished bronze mirror. There it is, Senator. Not everyone can wear this. Only male citizens of Rome, those who'd come of age and were in good legal standing, had the right to the toga. And within that group, only senators were entitled to the toga praetexta, with its purple stripe announcing your elite status like an embroidered business card. And the fabric wool. Always wool. No silks, no linens. That was the law. Why? Because wool was traditional, rustic, Roman. It reminded the Senate that power should come from simplicity and discipline, not Eastern luxury. At least, that's what they told themselves while sipping imported wine and lounging in villas. Now you leave your domus, descending marble steps toward the forum. The toga sways behind you like a banner. It's early, but the city is already humming, vendors shouting, clients trailing their patrons, and slaves everywhere doing everything. You can spot another senator by the way his toga folds don't sway, they glide. That's how you know he has a dressing slave who knows what he's doing. A young man in a tunic rushes by, eyes down, deliberately stepping out of your way. You don't even have to look at him. Your clothing speaks for you. The toga signals status, virtue, authority. Even if, let's be honest, none of those things are always true. But perception is everything. And here's a fun twist: some senators secretly hated the toga. It was bulky, impractical, and downright uncomfortable. You couldn't ride a horse properly in it, you couldn't run, and you certainly couldn't use the bathroom easily. But still you wore it, because not wearing it meant you weren't playing the game. Historians still argue whether the toga was ever meant to be practical, or if it evolved purely as a visual symbol. Some say it was originally meant to keep you warm. Others claim it was always about theater. Either way, the garment outlived its comfort. At the steps of the curia, you pause. The wind picks up, catching the edge of your toga and flapping it against your legs. A bit too undignified. You shift your stance to pin it down. That's better. You nod to the lictors guarding the Senate house. They recognize the stripe. You go in. The interior is dim, echoing with sandals on stone. You take your place on the curved marble bench arranged so every senator faces every other senator, perfect for debates, stares, and slow judgment. As you sit, you feel the thick wool bunch behind your back. No leaning here, just straight backs and sharper tongues. You glance to your left. There's Gaius fingering his gold ring again. Typical. Always polishing that thing like it'll vote for him. But that's his section we'll get to rings soon. For now, your attention drifts as the debate begins. Something about grain shipments. You let the words wash over you. The toga weighs down your shoulders, a constant scratchy reminder that you don't just have power, you have to look like it. You remember being a boy and watching your father put his toga on for the first time each day like a priest preparing for ritual. You thought it looked heroic. Now you know better. It's itchy. It's annoying. And it takes 2 people and a minor miracle to wear correctly. But still you wear it. Because in Rome, power is performance and the toga is your costume. The forum is your stage. And the people? Oh, they're always watching, especially the ones who want your job. You sit still, spine aching just a bit from the marble bench and the way the toga bunches under your lower back. But you can't move, not yet. Across from you, another senator shifts, ever so slightly, adjusting his sleeve just enough to let the light catch the object on his finger, a gold signet ring. It gleams like a sunbeam bouncing off ambition. You've got one too, of course. All senators do. But this one, his, is obnoxiously large. Thick, over-polished, and mounted with a gaudy red gem the size of a chickpea. It's the kind of ring that seems less about sealing documents and more about saying, I win. You glance at yours. A modest square of iron inset with carnelian. Functional, traditional, respectable, and much, much easier to fit under a glove if things get dangerous. Rings in Rome weren't mere fashion. They were tools, credential status symbols. Yours bears your family seal, an emblem carved into the stone used to press into hot wax and close letters contracts or secret messages. The imprint it leaves behind is legally binding. In the Republic, a man's handshake meant nothing without a proper seal to back it up. That's why you always carry your ring. It's the one object that merges your identity, legality, and vanity into a single wearable artifact. Historians still argue whether rings started as status symbols or as practical necessities for an expanding bureaucracy. Some suggest they were adapted from Etruscan customs. Others claim Rome swiped the idea wholesale from Greek aristocrats. But no matter where they came from, by the time you join the Senate, not having one is unthinkable. Once, only magistrates and certain high-ranking officials were permitted to wear gold rings. Everyone else had to settle for iron sturdy yes, but not particularly flashy. The rule was meant to preserve dignity and class boundaries. Naturally, it collapsed the moment someone wealthy enough paid a silversmith to upgrade, and no one dared stop him. By your time, that old law is just a formality. Gold rings now flood the Senate like wine at a triumphal feast. There's even a rumor, possibly true, that some senators send their slaves to wear decoy rings in public just to test if they're being spied on. You idly twist your own band, remembering how it was first slipped onto your finger. It didn't feel ceremonial, just final. A mark you now belong to the machine. Or perhaps that the machine now belonged to you. A courier enters the chamber and bows low, holding out a sealed tablet. You notice the wax red expensive imported. A nobleman's message clearly. The seal bears the unmistakable crest of a rival senator. You arch a brow. This could be anything an alliance offer a bribe, or another veiled threat disguised as diplomacy. You reach for your own stylus and writing board. If you reply, your ring will mark it. Your ring will speak for you even if you don't. You wonder, as you often do, whether anyone's ever stolen a ring to fake a deal. Of course they have. That's half the reason you keep a slave near your bedside, who literally guards your finger while you sleep. And don't think that hasn't led to a few awkward nighttime conversations. Still, the danger is real. A ring seal can approve inheritances, fake witness statements, even start wars if wielded recklessly. In fact, one Senator Publius, something was assassinated when someone forged a message bearing his seal, accused him of treason, and sent it from his own villa. He never saw it coming. You grip yours tighter. Your ring has weight. Not just physically, though it's solid enough to leave an imprint on a cheek if you slap someone hard enough. It has social weight, political weight, like carrying a vote in your pocket or a loaded dice. But rings also have vanity. One senator you recall with a chuckle once commissioned a ring with a cameo of himself, just so his messages could arrive with his profile embedded in the wax. Narcissistic, obviously. Effective. Sadly, yes. There's a kind of unspoken hierarchy to rings. The chunkier, the flashier, the more bejeweled well, that means either you're rich or trying to look like you are. Either way, people notice. And not always in a good way. Some say the Emperor Tiberius used to inspect his senators' rings at dinner just to keep track of who might be getting a little too rich for comfort. And then there's the matter of fingers. Placement matters. Most wear their seal on the fourth finger of the left hand close to the heart, they say. But some place it on the index for easy stamping. Others on the pinky, a bold move that says, "Yes, I'm vain and coordinated." There was a minor scandal last year when a senator tried wearing his ring on a chain around his neck, claimed it was closer to the voice of reason. Nobody bought it. The Senate nearly voted to censure him for poor taste, not treason. You glance around the chamber again. So many rings, so many little circles of power, and so much gossip behind every glint of gold. Suddenly, your slave coughs politely behind you. He's holding a small cloth pouch. You recognize it. It contains the wax ribbons and spare stylus you'll need after the session when you send your official reply. You nod once. He knows the routine. And just then, the light catches the gem in your ring just right, casting a tiny red glimmer on the marble floor. A reminder, you're not just a voice in this chamber. You're a seal. You're a signature. You're a senator. And in Rome, that means you carry your identity on your body, whether it scratches your shoulder or weighs down your finger. Your back is already sore, and the debate hasn't even reached its first shouting match. You glance toward the massive bronze doors of the Curia Julia and suppress a sigh. This is your life now, draped in ceremonial wool, wearing a ring that says, "Don't question me," and trying not to fall asleep while Gaius drones on about shipping tariffs in Ostia. Still, you've got to admit there's something about ascending those Senate steps each morning that gives you a particular kind of pride. Those wide, echoing stairs up to the Curia. They're not just architecture, they're a runway. Because here's the thing about Roman senators, you didn't just do politics. You performed it. Every appearance in public was a statement, every footstep an announcement. Your toga, your ring, your posture. Each element a signal broadcast to the rest of the Republic. And the grandest place to strut your senatorial stuff, the Roman Forum. So here you are, mid-morning, stepping out onto the steps. Sun pouring over the rooftops, toga trailing behind, like the train of an emperor. You pass a columnade to a passing equestrian class citizen. No purple stripe for him, poor guy, and give a subtle tug to your toga's fold. Better to emphasize the stripe. The latus clavus, that bold purple band running vertically down your toga's edge, is your badge of honor. It tells every pleb, trader, slave, and sycophant that you belong to the most exclusive club in town. Not the kind with wine and dancers, the kind with laws and assassinations. Historians still argue whether the width of the stripe actually varied with seniority, or if that's just something senators told each other to feel superior. One scroll from Cicero's day implies a wider stripe meant more prestige, but others suggest it was more about personal flair than formal rank. And you, of course, are very much in favor of personal flair. You slow your walk just a touch, enough to let a lesser nobleman walk ahead, and then effortlessly you catch up, just as a gaggle of spectators from the provinces arrives. Their eyes widen at the sight of you, your finely folded toga gleaming in the sun, your gold ring flashing with every gesture. You know what they're thinking. That must be someone important. You don't look at them directly, of course. You're too dignified for that. But you allow your gaze to drift, just enough to be seen not seeing them. Classic move. You're not the only one playing this game. Just ahead, Senator Lepidus stumbles slightly on the third stair from the bottom. His toga slips for a moment, just a moment, and reveals a bit too much ankle. You clock it immediately. That's going in your mental archive. You can use that later during a subtle insult about his inexperience with formality. Toga malfunctions are more common than you'd think. That's why many senators employ a vestiplicus, a specialized slave, whose entire job is to dress his master in the toga correctly. Not just throw it on, mind you, but fold it, drape it, and pin it with such finesse that every pleat looks like a sculpted waterfall. You remember your own dressing ceremony this morning. Arms out, eyes half shut as your slave wrapped you like a decorative couch. The wool was cold at first, then warm. Always heavy. You could never really move freely in it. But it didn't matter. Movement wasn't the point, dignity was. And besides, if someone sees you adjusting it yourself in public, you'd look like a pleb in borrowed robes. No, it's better to let your slave fuss with it in the shadows like you're too busy contemplating matters of state. You reach the top stair. From here, the forum stretches before you like a stone chessboard. Columns, arches, temples, vendors, gossipers, philosophers pretending not to gossip. You walk across it as though the paving stones are tracking your political momentum. You know this space well. It's not just the beating heart of Roman civic life. It's also the place where senators are most visible. You're often recognized here by citizens, by rivals, by your own clients. And they expect the look. If you showed up in a tunic and sandals, they'd assume you'd either gone mad or were preparing to fake your own death. Of course, some did fake their own deaths. That's another story. One fringe senator once tried to wear a redesigned toga with sleeves sewn into it for warmth, he claimed. The Senate literally laughed him out of the chamber. The proper toga has no sleeves, no shortcuts, and no excuses. That's the unspoken rule. Tradition matters more than comfort. And yet, even among all these rules, you find moments to flex. A finer weave of wool, a slightly richer shade of off-white, a border just a touch more vivid than standard purple. You notice. Others notice. But no one says a word. To call someone out would risk having your own fashion examined. A breeze rolls through, lifting the corner of your toga. You press it down coolly, pretending it was intentional. Somewhere behind you, someone snickers. That's the game. As you reach the entryway to the curia once more, you pass under a carved inscription detailing the latest law. You catch the reflection of your ring in a polished bronze shield on display. It glints. Your toga rustles softly with your stride. You're not just attending the Senate, you're performing Rome. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you wonder how long you can keep up the act before the wool gets too heavy. The toga itches. Again, always the same spot just behind your left shoulder where the wool folds back across your upper arm. You can't adjust it. Not here, not now. You're walking through the Basilica Julia flanked by a few younger senators, one of whom is trying far too hard to laugh at everything you say. You glance at him sideways. His toga looks freshly laundered, the stripe bright as royal plum. New money. Probably his father bought his way into the Senate during a grain crisis or some emergency legislation nobody remembers. Doesn't matter. He's here now, and his shoulder drape is crooked. You say nothing, but you file it away. These little things matter in Rome, because here's the truth being, a Roman senator isn't just about what you wear, it's about why you're allowed to wear it. And you were born into this wool. The toga virilis, the plain white toga of manhood, marked the day you stopped being a child and started being part of the Republic. You still remember the ceremony. Everyone does. The moment your father placed it on you, his expression solemn but proud. The sudden realization that you'd never again be allowed to simply exist without performing status. Historians still argue whether the ceremony was more about celebrating maturity or enforcing conformity. Some believe it was a rite of passage rooted in tribal traditions long before the Republic was even a thing. Others claim it emerged primarily to separate the upper classes from everyone else. You didn't care about any of that at the time. You were 12, maybe 14, depending on the family. All you knew was you got to take off the bulla, that little charm necklace children wore to ward off bad luck, and step into your future. Into the wool. And gods, it was scratchy, but also thrilling. You remember the weight of the fabric for the first time, the way it forced your posture to change. You couldn't slouch in a toga. You had to stand like someone who mattered. And the looks from clients' family, even slaves, shifted. You weren't cute anymore. You were expected. Now as you pass through the bustling colonnade, you spot a younger boy watching from behind a statue's base. His eyes are wide. He's clearly never seen so many senators gathered in one place. You catch his gaze, and for a moment, you're back there, before the wool, before the ring, before the marble steps, and whispered threats disguised as pleasantries. You give him the smallest of nods. He might remember that for the rest of his life. You rejoin your companions. One is telling a story about a gladiator who tried to impersonate a senator by stealing a toga from a public bath. It didn't end well. The crowd noticed the way he wrapped it too tight around the waist, not enough flow. He got 3 steps into the Senate House before someone shouted, "That man's folds are plebeian." Everyone laughs. It's a funny story, sure, but it also underscores how closely Romans watch these things. It's not just what you say, it's how your garments say it for you. Toga, too, short, cheap. Folded backwards, foreign. Stained, disgraceful. Paired with the wrong sandals. Honestly, just go home. There's a reason senators have dressing slaves, and it's not laziness. It's defense. The fabric is long, about 18 feet. If you try to manage it yourself, you'll trip over it like a drunken satyr. That's how reputations crumble. Not in the Senate chamber, but on the walk there. Even the ring has a life cycle. You remember your first one thin iron, no gem, just the family crest. You wore it proudly, used it clumsily, smudged more wax than you sealed. But now your current ring is weightier, the gem subtle, the seal precise. You've grown into it. Like the toga, like the roll, but not everyone does. Some cling to the trappings without earning the presence. Others flaunt their fabrics but stumble on every step of real debate. Rome is full of men wrapped in symbols they can't live up to. And the forum, well, it remembers. A slave hurries over, whispering that your Sina invitation has changed. Dinner at Crassus's villa, not Octavia's. You nod, make a mental note to wear the better sandals. Crassus has marble floors. You can't have your hem dragging. The sun's drifting westward, now shadows lengthening across the forum. The air smells of dust, sweat, and slow roasting onions. You're ready to head back toward the Palatine, maybe stop by the baths. Just a rinse. Nothing long. You don't want to undo your toga folds entirely, redraping would take too long. As you turn, you pass a statue of an old senator long dead, carved in marble with his toga frozen mid-drape. You wonder how many times he stood where you're standing now. How many mornings he cursed the weight of the wool, twisted the ring on his finger, and gave polite nods to men who wanted his seat. And you wonder, when they carved that statue, did they get the folds right? You bet he'd have cared. The moment your father laid the toga virilis across your shoulders, your entire body itched with nerves. And wool. Mostly nerves, though. It was the day your name changed, not in letters, but in weight. People started calling you young senator even before you held office. That's how it works in Rome. The cloth comes before the career. Today, you're remembering that moment because you've just watched another boy go through it. A friend's son, awkward and stiff, trying to walk like his legs aren't being restrained by 7 meters of wool. His mother weeps, his father beams, and all the while the boy looks like he's trying not to trip over his own ceremony. You give him a sympathetic nod. You've been there. The toga virilis, plain and off-white, is the base uniform for any Roman male citizen coming of age. It's both a celebration and a warning. You're no longer protected by the charms of childhood. No more bulla, no more excuses. You're expected to understand the law, contribute to the Republic, and, most of all, dress like a proper Roman. Historians still argue about the exact age at which the toga virilis was conferred. Some say 14, others 16. It depended on the family, the political climate, and how much facial hair the boy could muster. Either way, once that wool touched your skin, you belonged to Rome. But the transition wasn't just emotional, it was political theater. Families timed these ceremonies for maximum visibility, ideally during festivals, when crowds were thick and gossip was plentiful. You'd walk to the forum, escorted by friends and relatives, your brand new toga gleaming like fresh parchment. Every glance was a potential future client. Every step a declaration, I'm here now. Watch me rise. The wool wasn't comfortable, but you wore it with pride. You even tried to pretend you liked the chafing just to seem more seasoned. And then came the ring. You didn't get your signet right away. That came later, after proving yourself or having a family name so prominent it substituted for character. But you remembered eyeing your father's ring as a child. The way it gleamed when he gestured the weight it seemed to carry in every room. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a stamp, a seal, a passport to power. Eventually, yours arrived. Not as grand as your father's, but heavy enough to matter. Your family crest carved deep into a square of agate. Not flashy, but sharp. You spent hours practicing how to press it into warm wax firm, but not too deep. Tilted just right to leave a crisp imprint. The first time you sealed a letter with it, you felt like a god. The first time you signed a bad deal with it, you felt like a fool. That's the balance of power in Rome, prestige and peril in equal folds. You remember one incident clearly. A cousin borrowed his older brother's ring to impress a merchant. The deal went through, only to collapse later when the real owner denied ever making it. Lawsuits followed. So did exile. The lesson was clear. Never let your seal out of your sight, or your fate might not be your own. Today, you twirl your ring absently as you watch the boy shuffle forward, clearly afraid to speak. His fingers twitch toward his shoulder, probably fighting the urge to scratch. Don't do it, kid. That's how they know you're new. You lean against a column watching as the crowd gives polite applause. It's a right yes, but also a test. Everyone's watching how he carries the cloth. If he smiles too much, he's arrogant. If he stumbles, he's weak. The toga doesn't just wrap around your body, it wraps around your reputation. You overhear an older senator grumble something about another parade of soft-spoken toga babies. You don't respond. You remember being called that once. You also remember out-debating the same man 2 years later in front of half the forum. The toga is long, but memory is longer. Later at the celebratory feast, you find the boy and clap a hand on his shoulder. He jumps slightly. You chuckle. You'll get used to it, you say. The wool. The weight. The watching. He laughs nervously. You note that his ring finger is still bare. Good. No need to rush into that part yet. He asks you something then. Something that sticks in your mind. Did it ever stop feeling like a costume? You think about it. The question is more serious than it sounds. And no, honestly, it never really does. But you learn how to act the part. That's the whole game. The toga is the costume. The ring is the prop. But if you play your role well enough, long enough, people stop seeing the actor. They only see the office. You drink wine. You toast his future. You tell him to practice walking up steps without looking down. You tell him never to fidget in public. You tell him that if his ring ever feels too light, it probably means someone's stolen his influence. And then you leave the feast early because tomorrow you'll wake up and wrap yourself again in 7 meters of politics and your shoulder still hurts. Morning again. The city breathes dust and ambition. You're already dressed barely, and your vestiplicus is circling you like a hawk, Tugging, folding, adjusting, grunting disapproval. You wrap the shoulder fold too tight, he mutters. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. You've worn this thing for decades, but the moment you try doing it yourself, catastrophe. You lift your arms obediently as he repositions the fabric around your torso, creating those signature diagonal swoops. The goal is to look effortless, but it takes 20 minutes of choreography and a slave who knows geometry better than most senators. Outside the street is waking up sandals on stone shutters swinging open the occasional bray of a donkey. But in here, you're being tailored for respectability. Because not just anyone gets to wear a toga. There are rules, strict ones. Rome doesn't hand out its woolen glory robes to just any toga-curious citizen. You've got to qualify. And you qualify. Oh, you qualify. First, you must be freeborn a civis Romanus in good standing. No former slaves, no foreigners, no women. Sorry, ladies. This is Rome. It's nothing personal, just centuries of deeply entrenched patriarchy wrapped in wool. Your toga must also reflect your status. If you're a regular citizen, you get the toga virilis plain white. No stripes, nothing fancy. If you're a senator like you, then it's the toga praetexta with its famous purple band. If you're running for office, you wear the toga candida bleached so white it glows like ambition. And if you're mourning someone, you don the dull, drab toga pula, a walking announcement of grief. Historians still argue whether these distinctions were always enforced, or if enforcement fluctuated depending on who was in charge. Some suggest that in the early republic, nobody cared as long as you didn't wear purple unless you were purple. Others insist fashion policing was constant. Either way, by your era, the social uniform code is as rigid as a patrician's posture. A knock at the door. Another senator has arrived to walk with you to the forum. You allow yourself a final adjustment in the mirror, squinting to make sure the purple stripe lies perfectly along the edge. It does. Your vestiplicus nods content. Outside, your colleague's toga is immaculate. Of course it is. He has 3 dressers and a slave whose only job is to keep a brush for removing street dust. You exchange a nod and set off, and as you walk, you pass people. Each one evaluates your clothing without realizing they're doing it. The laundresses at the corner stall notice whether your toga's hem has dirt stains. The old soldier begging by the basilica steps squints to see if your stripe is truly imperial purple or just well-dyed maroon. The baker's apprentice pauses just briefly to admire how your ring flashes in the morning light. They know, they all know, because clothing in Rome talks. It tells everyone your rank, your history, your wealth, and sometimes your ambitions. That's why if a man from the provinces tries to wrap himself in a senator's toga, people stare. That's why there are laws, literally. A man wearing a toga praetexta without proper office could be fined, arrested, or publicly humiliated. One guy, Lucius somebody, once wore one to his daughter's wedding just to look more impressive in front of his new in-laws. Got spotted. Got dragged before a magistrate. Got exiled. True story. Or at least, that's how the story gets told. Same difference. And don't even think about wearing the toga picta, the entirely purple one embroidered with gold. That's reserved for triumphs and emperors. You'd be safer juggling hot coals while insulting Jupiter. As you near the forum, you spot a man in a dull, almost brownish toga walking with his head lowered. A senator in mourning. You can tell from the hue, the limpness of the cloth, and the fact that he's not speaking to anyone. The toga pulla isn't just symbolic, it changes your entire presence. You're not expected to engage debate or be clever. You're a walking sigh, and then you remember wearing one yourself. Not long ago, actually, when your brother died. You walked through the city cloaked in silence. No purple, no ring. Just grief. People nodded respectfully, stepped aside. That's Rome. Even your clothing mourns. Now back in bright sunlight, you readjust your stride. Toga neat, ring centered, mind sharpened. Another senator passes his stripe suspiciously wide. You and your companion exchange a look. That's the thing, no one says anything directly, but oh, the looks. There's always someone testing the limits, trying to edge their stripe a little wider, their wool a little whiter, their ring a little flashier. Like they're climbing the social ladder one thread at a time. But the Senate remembers. Rome remembers. The fabric of tradition is just as watchful as the people who wear it. And so you keep walking every fold in place, every step silent but significant. Your garments obey the law, but more importantly, they prove you belong. The toga candida always makes your eyes ache. It's too white, blinding in the sun, impossible to keep clean and stiff from the chalk, and Fuller's powder worked into it to bleach it to its trademark brilliance. You remember your own campaign, how you sweated beneath that unnaturally radiant toga while trying to look noble and serene, all while whispering sweet promises to men who would later pretend not to know you. You see one now. He's campaigning hard, wearing the toga candida, and smiling so much it looks like his face might crack. He's surrounded by attendants brushing invisible specks from his shoulder and reminding him to keep his ring visible. It's all theater. Politics in Rome always is. You catch his eye. He nods. You nod. You both know the game. Historians still argue whether candidates really went around begging votes in person or whether that's a later romanticization. Some inscriptions suggest extensive door-to-door politicking. Others imply it was more about being seen in the right toga in the right place by the right people. But the toga candida wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a declaration. You were saying, I seek office, I seek responsibility. And yes, I'm willing to sweat visibly in public to get it. The name itself, Candida, gives us the word candidate. You wear your ambition on your sleeve, literally. And believe me, that sleeve, it's a nightmare. The over-bleached wool stains if you so much as glance at a fruit cellar. It clings in the heat and wilts in the rain. If you're unlucky enough to wear it during a sandstorm, and you have been, you end up looking like a half-buried statue of hubris. You smile, remembering the moment you finally removed yours for the last time, folded it one last time, and handed it off to a slave who immediately muttered something about blessing the gods. This part was over. Still, you respected the ritual. The whiteness was symbolic, a visual oath of purity and integrity. The irony is so thick it could be bottled and sold as Roman perfume, because everyone knew just underneath that glowing toga was a man sweating bullets and making backroom deals over wine-soaked dinners. You certainly did. You still recall one campaign dinner where a rival's candida toga began to sag after too many cups of Falernian wine. The folds drooped, the shoulders slipped, and someone took a very detailed note of it. The next morning, rumors flew about his lack of Roman discipline. He lost by 37 votes. Because in Rome, even your sweat stains are political. You pass the candidate now. He's pressing his ring into a wax seal as a scribe reads off some agreement, probably promising to repair an aqueduct or pardon someone's second cousin's fishmonger. The candidate sees you watching and offers a confident smile, just a hair too wide. You raise a brow, tilt your head slightly. The barest nod. That's enough to unnerve him. Your companion chuckles. Remember when we had to smile that much? You nod. My cheeks still hurt. The candidate fumbles with his ring, adjusting it, making sure the seal faces outward. That's another thing, campaign etiquette. Always show the seal, even when you're not stamping anything. It's a reminder, I have a name. I have a symbol. I'm not just any man, I'm someone whose mark matters. Some tried to get clever with it too. There was a brief trend, illegal technically, where men started engraving clever little phrases around the edge of the ring's face. Stuff like a faithful friend or Rome's finest son. Utterly against regulation. Mostly ignored. until one fool had vote for me or else carved into his ring. He was laughed out of politics and forced to sell grain in Puteoli. You glance down at your own hand. Your ring has aged well, simple, authoritative, worn at the edges. No slogan. Just the deep, clean engraving of your family crest. You've never changed it. Never needed to. It's not flash that earns respect here. It's consistency. You're reminded of one particularly absurd senator who owned 3 signet rings and rotated them based on the meeting. One for religious matters, one for civil policy, and one no one's quite sure for blackmail. Rumor had it he once forgot which was which, and sealed a temple grant with the emblem of a severed goosehead. The priests were displeased. A gust of wind tugs at your hem. You step aside as a group of schoolboys passes, giggling and poking each other as they spot the candidate. One mimics the stiff-lipped smile, another stumbles, pretending his toga's too long. Their tutor hushes them, but you allow yourself a smile. That's how it starts. Watching, imitating, learning the posture of power before you understand the substance. You remember being that boy, wide-eyed and curious, watching a senator pass with folded dignity, and a ring that caught the sun just right. Back then, it looked like glory. Now you know better. It's a performance, yes, but it's also a burden. Cloth and gold and expectation stitched into every step. The candidate waves to a small cluster of voters, mostly older men in clean tunics, nodding sternly. He steps forward, toga pulled tight, and glowing ring glinting with deliberate precision. He's doing everything right. And still, you know half the chamber is already betting how long he'll last. Because the toga candidate shines sure, but it also exposes every wrinkle. You're seated at the edge of the rostra, now idly fingering the hem of your toga, while the sun shifts its golden fingers down the marble buildings. You've positioned yourself just right so your latest clavis, that bold purple stripe sewn into the edge of your toga, catches the afternoon light with all the subtlety of a senator, trying not to look like he cares what people think. Which of course is impossible. You all care. Deeply. It's not just the stripe. It's the shade of the stripe. Is it true purple or just purple adjacent? Is the wool dyed with real Tyrian pigment boiled from Murex snails and worth its weight in gold? Or is it the cheap substitute from some Eastern import market? You can spot the difference. So can everyone else. Color matters in Rome. Desperately. Clothing color is a language, and senators are fluent. You're wearing the toga praetexta, the version trimmed with purple that says, "I am of the senatorial class. I wield power. I am exactly as self-important as I appear." And just to drive the point home, your ring today is inset with a small square of amethyst, a wink of luxury, but not enough to raise eyebrows. Historians still argue whether Tyrian purple was strictly regulated in your era, or whether enforcement was more about social pressure than a legal consequence. There's no Senate guard yanking togas off people in the forum, but show up at a public event wearing the wrong shade, and your reputation will leave bruises. You sip watered wine from a ceramic cup and watch the crowd. You see togas with red borders, magistrates in temporary office. You see completely undyed togas, plain white, the look of the average citizen. You see the occasional patchy, sun-bleached thing that looks like it's been handed down since Romulus himself. Probably worn by someone hoping no one notices their stripe has faded to pink. Then there's the toga pulla, a rare but striking presence. Somber, dark, heavy with the color of mourning. You once wore one for 10 straight days when your uncle passed. It was stiff and uncomfortable, and its very discomfort was the point. Grief in Rome is a public performance. If you mourned privately, it didn't count. A senator 2 benches away from you is wearing his praetexta with almost theatrical care. His stripe is just a little too wide, his ring turned to face outward just a little too obviously. You know the type, ambitious, insecure, and hoping no one notices that the gem in his ring is glass. But the forum always notices. Another man walks by in a tunic dyed in saffron. You raise an eyebrow. Technically legal but bold. Yellow is the color of women's robes and festival garments. For a man to wear it here during daylight, that's either high confidence or low judgment. Your companion leans in whispering, "That's Quintus." His tailor misread the dye batch. He's pretending it's deliberate. You grin. That's how it goes. Every fold, every thread, every color loaded with meaning. Unspoken but universally understood. You don't need to say I'm powerful if your wool says it for you. There's a story you're not sure if it's true about a senator who wore an entirely gray toga during a drought. He claimed it symbolized the dusty fields and dry rivers, a gesture of solidarity. It was widely praised, until someone realized he had simply forgotten to bleach it. Even failure can be repackaged as philosophy if you wear it well. You stretch your legs and admire your sandals' newly oiled leather, understated design, but clean as temple marble. Pairing the right footwear with a toga is harder than it sounds. Sandals too rustic and you look provincial. Too ornate and it clashes with the whole Republican modesty routine. You once saw a man wearing gilded sandals and a toga pula. It was like watching a funeral conducted by a street performer. Suddenly a shadow crosses you. A young tribune bows slightly. "Apologies, Senator," he says. "But may I ask your border dye? Do you source it locally?" You blink. The kid's nervous, sweating slightly, but he's looking not at your face, not at your ring, but directly at your toga, inspecting it like it's a piece of policy. You smile slow and practiced. "My supplier's in Baiai, you say." He imports from Sidon. The tribune exhales like you've just handed him a secret. Of course he nods. "I thought it looked Sidonian." The saturation. He walks off scribbling something. You resist the urge to laugh. The saturation. But you do check your hem, just in case. That's the game. You're not just dressing for your peers, you're dressing for the watchers. The aides, the clients, the writers, the gossips. Because long after you're gone, someone will describe your policies as firm, like the folds of his toga, or wavering like his stripe in the wind. And someday a sculptor might chisel your likeness into marble, and he'll spend 10 days getting the fold of your stripe just right, because in Rome, power fades, but style gets immortalized. You walk past a marble basin where a group of senators are casually pretending not to preen. They murmur about policy, about naval blockades, and the price of imported figs, but you can see it the way one tilts his hand to catch the light, the way another fidgets with his sleeve to show off a chunky ring set with something suspiciously iridescent. Ring envy. It's real. It's Rome. Your own ring is modest by comparison. Classic carnelian square face, deep carving. A little chipped at one corner, but dignified. Honest. The kind of ring that says, I've been in the game long enough to stop pretending. But some of your peers, they're still climbing. And nothing says, please take me seriously, quite like a signet ring that looks like it could anchor a fishing boat. You spot Lucius Varius. Of course it's Lucius. His ring is the size of a pigeon's egg mounted with lapis lazuli, etched with a family crest no one remembers, and surrounded by a delicate spiral of gold filigree. It practically sings every time he moves his hand. You're not sure if that's the breeze or your imagination, but either way, it's working. People look, people remember. Historians still argue whether rings in the late Republic became exaggerated as genuine social tools or devolved into pure vanity. Some argue they were originally restricted to equestrians and senators. Others claim rings were once reserved for messengers and officials, purely functional. But once the gold came, and all bets were off. You lean against a pillar and sip wine from a silver cup, watching the dance unfold. There's the ring twister, the man who can't stop rotating it between his fingers while he speaks. There's the nose scratcher who always accidentally raises his ring hand to his face when making a point. And of course, the exaggerated sealers, the men who slam their ring into wax so hard you half expect a plume of smoke. You've done it yourself, once or twice. Okay, maybe more. Because the ring isn't just decorative. It's the fastest way to say I have power without saying a word. You could be silent all morning and still command a room if your ring is bright enough, unique enough, heavy enough. And weight matters, not just in symbolism, literally. A good signet ring has heft. You feel it when you press it to wax. You feel it when you rest your hand on a bench and it thuds softly on the stone. That thud means something. You've been in meetings where a senator didn't speak at all, just tapped his ring rhythmically while others argued. That sound was its own argument. You remember a dinner party where one young upstart arrived with not one but 2 rings, one on each hand. One for sealing the other, he said, for fashion. The room went cold. You don't explain your rings in Rome. If you have to explain, you've already lost. Of course this obsession leads to problems. You once heard of a senator who had his ring stolen while bathing. The thief used it to approve the sale of 3 properties and 24 slaves, all before the senator had even dried off. He showed up at the records office in a panic towel around his waist, screaming that his finger had been impersonated. They sorted it out eventually, but not before the thief disappeared. The properties were gone, and the towel was immortalized in 3 very undignified poems. Your ring, though, stays with you, day and night. You have a small bronze box where you lock it while you bathe, and when you sleep, it stays in a pouch around your neck. Not because you think someone will steal it, but because you know someone might try. There's always someone hungry enough, and that hunger creates a kind of fashion arms race. Rings get bigger, stones get flashier, inscriptions grow longer and more self-congratulatory. One Senator Sextus something once commissioned a ring with his entire family motto etched around the band. Fortune favors the bold and the extremely well-groomed. It circled the whole thing like a snake biting its tail. He dropped it in a latrine during a festival. It was never recovered. Poetic. You glance down at your own again. The gem is worn smooth in places, but the seal is as sharp as ever. You remember the feeling of pressing it into wax for the first time. Your hand trembling slightly, the wax bubbling under the heat, and then click. That sound. That satisfaction. Your identity immortalized in red. Now it's routine. You seal letters with the ring without thinking. You've signed decrees, pardons, wedding invitations, and at least one anonymous note that just read, "Careful who you trust." No one ever traced it back to you. That's the beauty of a distinctive seal. It hides behind its own authority. A courier arrives with a letter. You nod and break the wax someone else's ring. A little too elaborate. You guess the sender before even reading the script. Yep, Gaius. Always Gaius. You draft a reply, dip the seal into warm wax, and press. The ring hisses quietly as it meets the surface, then lifts away, clean, proud, precise. Lucius Varius, with his blue monstrosity, leans over as if trying to glimpse your seal. You tilt the page just enough for him not to see. He smiles that oily, too smooth smile. Still using the carnelian, I see. You shrug. Still works. Because in the end, the ring doesn't make the man. The man makes the ring matter. And you've made yours unforgettable. You're back in the Senate House, seated near the curved edge of the chamber, running your thumb across your signet ring's face. You've done it 100 times before, more probably, but this time it's not just idle habit. You're thinking about its message. See, it's not just that you wear a ring, it's what's on it. Because that tiny carved surface is more than jewelry. It's your personal brand, your family's claim, and if you're careful, your invisible weapon. In Rome, everyone who matters carries a ring, but the difference is in the design. Yours bears your genes, symbol a she-wolf beneath an olive tree. Classic, humble, a nod to both nurture and statecraft. It tells people you're rooted in Rome's mythology, but not drunk on your own importance. It says, I'll feed the Republic. and maybe bite if I must. Other senators? Not so subtle. One has a ring depicting a charging bull. Another favors a stylized thunderbolt, which seems to scream, yes. I'd like to be struck by divine favor, preferably this week. There's a man Pulcher you think whose ring shows his own profile chin exaggerated like some heroic bust. The wax seal comes out looking like a smug coin. Fitting, really. Historians still argue whether the iconography of these seals was mostly functional or aspirational. Did they reflect family traditions, or were they chosen to intimidate, flatter, or deceive? The truth is probably all of the above. Rome is a place where meaning stacks like marble layered deliberate and very, very hard to change. You remember an infamous trial Marcus Scribonius accused of forging a will. The case turned on a single seal impression. The wax was blurred, the carving indistinct, but the shape was almost right. That almost cast doubt for weeks. In the end, the deciding factor was the direction of the wolf's snout. The real one pointed left, the forgery right. Marcus was exiled, the wax testified. Today, as your ring presses against your skin, you're aware of its quiet authority. Even in this chamber with all the voices rising, all the robes swirling, your ring is your vote, your proof, your ghost. You're interrupted by a clerk who hands you a bundle of wax tablets. Property disputes. Tedious but dangerous if ignored. You break the seals 3 different ones. One is cracked, one partially melted, and one blank. That's a message. No seal means no trust. No accountability. Someone sent something they didn't want traced. You make a note to speak with the tabulari, the record keepers, before day's end. But now the Senate is stirring. A proposal's being read. Your half-listening eyes flicking across the room. The tribunes are clustered near the rear, whispering and scribbling. A group of junior senators lean in to hear a veteran tell them how things used to be, as if the Republic weren't still on fire in slow motion. And then there's you, older now, but not yet old. Comfortable in your toga, commanding in your silence. And that ring, it's part of the act. When you lift your hand, it catches the light. People stop talking, just for a second, but long enough. You remember the first time you realized what a gesture meant in this space. You were speaking on a grain levee, nervous, unsure. But then you raised your hand mostly to brush your hair back, and your ring glinted. The chamber went quiet. Not because of your words. Because of the signal. The seal had spoken. You were official. You were one of them. Now you use it like punctuation. A slow fist on the bench. A brief touch to your lip, a deliberate press against a tablet before handing it off. It's not showy, it's practiced, it's precise. There are rumors too, whispers, that certain rings carry unofficial meanings. A falcon might imply ties to a particular military faction, a rose symbol of discretion, an empty square, a quiet threat. You've heard stories of senators slipping altered rings into circulation, sending mixed signals just to unsettle their rivals. You even saw one man present a ring with no seal at all. Just a polished face of obsidian like a dark mirror. Said he'd retired from active symbolism. The chamber called it avant-garde. You called it a midlife crisis with gemstones. Outside the curia, this all plays differently. Among the people, rings are still respected, but feared too. A ring means you can sign laws, order arrests, bless deals. It means you're not just a man, you're an institution distilled into jewelry. And the forgeries, well, they've grown. You hear tales of smiths who specialize in copying seals, of rebel groups pressing false agreements into black market tablets. You once saw a counterfeit ring that was better carved than the original. That's the terrifying thing, the seal's only as strong as the trust behind it. Break that, and even gold turns to dust. Still you carry yours everywhere. It's with you during debates, dinners, long baths, and late-night walks through the Palatine Gardens. You've sealed truce letters with it. condolences, death orders. And somewhere in a vault beneath your villa lies a tiny scroll bound in red thread sealed in triple wax. No one knows what it says, no one but you. And when the time comes, the seal will speak louder than words. You've always liked the moment when the wax melts. There's something strangely satisfying in the way it softens rich red, smelling faintly of resin and smoke, and how it pools in that perfect little oval waiting for your ring to define it. You press. The wax hisses slightly as it takes the shape of a wolf beneath an olive tree. Done. You let it cool. Then you slide the tablet shut and tie it with thread. Delivery can wait until morning. But once, not so long ago, you learned the cost of getting it wrong. It was late summer, the air heavy with citrus and conspiracy. You'd received a sealed tablet from a senator you trusted. Old friend. Traveled roads with you, voted with you, once even slept under the same cloak during a storm on campaign. You recognized the seal immediately. His ring had a small lion's head with a crescent moon tucked beneath the jaw. Unmistakable. The message support a particular grain law. Vote yes, speak loudly, bring allies. You did. And then, 3 days later, the real senator arrived home from his villa in Sicily. He'd never sent the letter. Someone had forged the seal. Historians still argue how common this practice truly was. Some claim seal forgery was rare and punishable by death. Others insist it was so common that senators often employed multiple seals just to confuse potential copycats. But in your case, the fallout was very real. You were humiliated, whispered about. One man called it an unfortunate lapse of verification. Another called it what it was you'd been played. You still don't know who made the false ring. No one was ever caught. But for weeks, every letter you received was held up to the light, scrutinized and sniffed. Yes, actually sniffed, for the right blend of wax and perfume. Some senators mixed distinctive scents into their seal wax. Lavender, clove, even garlic once, though that one was probably an accident. Yours cedar and a hint of myrrh. Subtle, clean, unmistakably yours. But even scent can be mimicked. You began to watch the seals as closely as you watched the words inside them. A smudge too deep, a border too wide, a line too shallow to match the original carving. You trained your eyes to spot the difference between sincerity and sabotage. And when you really didn't trust someone, you'd break the wax and press the unsealed message between your palms, testing the heat. A cold message was safe. One still warm that meant tampering. You still remember the first time you caught someone. A courier from a friendly faction handed you a letter with slightly damp wax. Fresh. Too fresh. Your ring had a groove for testing. Just lightly drag it across the surface. If it smudged, it wasn't truly set. It smudged. You didn't accuse him. You just nodded and took the message, then sent your reply via a different courier, one you trusted. The game never ends, but sometimes you can change the rules mid-play. Today you see it happening again. A senator across the aisle, Decimus, with the twisted ring receives a message. He doesn't open it immediately. He stares at the seal for a long time. You watch his hand twitch, then press it to his chin. He's unsure. And you are sure he's unsure, that's enough. You make a note. There's a kind of whispered terror in wax. It holds secrets, trust, and betrayal in its cooling surface. You know men who've faked seals to start rumors. Others who've smeared them half-set to create the illusion of panic. One senator even kept a broken seal in his pocket, his father's ring mark. He'd press it into wine spills to remember him, but there are darker tales. You once heard of a seal left unbroken on a soldier's letter buried with him intact. The letter was said to contain orders. No one ever read them. The wax kept his final command in eternal silence. And that's the thing. The ring isn't just a mark. It's a memory. A line drawn through time that says, I was here. I meant this. I said so. Yours has sealed laws, accusations, confessions, a few love poems, and once an apology you didn't mean. Each one still exists somewhere, tucked into archives, slipped between clay tablets, burned, or passed from hand to hand like a secret too precious to speak aloud. You've thought about changing your seal, a new emblem, something bolder. But it would feel like breaking a promise to everyone who's ever opened something marked by your wolf and olive. So you keep it. Old, familiar, worn smooth at the edges. Because even if the face changes, the hand behind it matters more. Still, you double-check every seal now, even those from friends. Especially those from friends. Your foot nudges a loose tile as you enter your villa's atrium, and for a brief, glorious moment you imagine what it would be like to trip fully on your toga, tumble forward like a collapsing statue, and just lie there, quiet, free. But no, you catch yourself. You straighten. You remember who you are. Because wearing a toga isn't just a skill, it's a burden. A daily performance with no intermission. And today, after a long session in the Curia, and 2 sealed letters that smelled suspiciously like re-sealed letters, you're ready to fling the thing into the Tiber. You don't, of course. You sigh and head to your dressing room. Your vestiplicus is already waiting, arms crossed, expression tight with judgment. Heavy on the left fold again, he mutters. You grunt. The toga is many things, symbol of rank. Statement of virtue, sponge for sweat. But one thing it is not is user-friendly. The process of putting it on is a ritual. A choreographed dance involving patience geometry, and at least one underappreciated slave with a knack for spatial reasoning. This morning, it took him 20 minutes to get the folds right. You stood there, arms raised like a statue being unpacked, while he draped, twisted, flipped, adjusted, and finally patted your shoulder as if to say, go out there and fake dignity. Now he begins the reverse, carefully lifting the fabric from your shoulders, unwinding you like a mummy of statecraft. You feel the pressure release from your chest, the weight slide from your back, the smell of sun-warmed wool escaping into the room like a faint ghost of the day. Historians still argue whether Roman senators actually hated their togas or merely tolerated them. Some sources suggest many wore tunics whenever possible and only wrapped up for appearances. Others claim certain senators came to love the stiffness of ceremony. It made them feel official, armored by protocol. You admire the symbolism. You despise the sensation. You stretch your arms, roll your shoulders. The simple tunic underneath suddenly feels like luxury. Linen on skin instead of wool. Breathable. Movable. Livable. The slave folds the toga carefully, never carelessly. It must be hung in a way that preserves the creases. Tomorrow he'll shake it out and air it by the window for exactly 1 hour, no more, no less. Any longer and the sun might fade the purple stripe. Any less, and the scent of your last argument will linger in the cloth. Your ring, though, you keep that on. Always. Even at home when you're pacing the courtyard or sipping watered wine in the garden. It's part of you. You twist it without thinking. You seal small notes with it even when there's no audience. It's become your signature, even in silence. You think of the young senators, new, hungry, terrified of wardrobe disaster. You've seen them panic as their shoulder folds collapse mid-speech. You've watched them sneak into corners to retuck the hem. Once, you even watched a man faint under the weight of an improperly folded ceremonial toga. He blamed the heat. Everyone blamed the fabric. And then there's the cloakroom chaos. On big Senate days, you have to arrive early just to get a dressing spot. The atrium fills with senators standing half-wrapped arguing about grain laws while getting folded like linens. Your own vestiplicus once scolded another slave for attempting an abrupt drape. You didn't even know that was a thing until you saw it, a diagonal fold, cutting straight across the chest like a sash. Scandalous. That's how gladiators wore their capes. The whole thing is absurd. You know it. Everyone knows it. And yet, no one dares to simplify. Why? Because the absurdity is the point. Wearing the toga proves your discipline, your willingness to endure discomfort for the sake of tradition. It's a visual cue I'm part of something older than myself. And yes, I itch constantly because of it. You sit in a cushioned chair now rubbing the crook of your elbow where the wool always digs. You think of the old Senator Fabius who once proposed a toga reform bill. He wanted to reduce the length by 2 feet, eliminate the underfold, and add a hidden clasp to hold the shoulder in place. He was laughed out of the chamber. One senator called him the tailor of treason. And the best part, in private, everyone agreed it was a great idea, but tradition doesn't budge in Rome, especially not wool-bound tradition. So tomorrow you'll get up early. Again. You'll stretch your arms out like some reluctant altar offering. Again. You'll be wrapped in semi-dignified silence. Again. And you'll walk through the forum pretending you're not afraid to trip over your own symbolism. At least until someone slips on their own hem in front of the rostra and distracts everyone. You smile. Because the truth is, the toga doesn't just cover you. It connects you to every senator who's ever grumbled in the dark while being folded into civility. It's a shared misery. A brotherhood of chafing and performance. You lift your cup. The wine's cool, the air is still, and your back is no longer bearing the weight of legacy in wool. For now. The smell of incense curls around your nostrils as you step under the archway. The morning sun filters in through thin columns, casting ribbons of gold across the marble floor. You're attending a sacrificium, and you're already regretting how tightly your toga is wrapped today. The wool sticks slightly to the back of your knees. Your shoulders ache from holding them back in dignified posture. And your ring. Your ring feels like it weighs double its usual mass in a holy space. Because today isn't just another Senate session or another tedious grain dispute. Today is about ceremony, about ritual, about reminding everyone that Rome doesn't just govern Rome worships. You take your place near the altar between 2 other senators whose togas are so white they could blind Apollo. A pontifex murmurs greetings and wafts smoke over a small brazier. You nod solemnly, resisting the urge to rub your eyes. This is your 6th official ritual this month, because senators don't just legislate, they officiate. They show up at funerals, public festivals, temple openings, and any event that involves omens, birds, or entrails. And in all of these moments, the toga is mandatory. Not just a suggestion, a requirement. Historians still argue whether the connection between Roman religion and dress code was symbolic or superstitious. Some say the gods only listened to those wrapped in proper wool. Others argue it was just another layer of ceremony meant to signal control. But no matter the reason here, you are itching in sacred silence. The officiant begins the invocation. You murmur the appropriate responses. Your ring glints in the firelight. The man beside you holds out a sacrificial tablet already impressed with his family seal. That's a trick you've learned, the pre-sealed offering. It makes you look prepared, pious, efficient. No fumbling with melting wax or dropped tablets while the augurs watch. You nod respectfully as the priest cuts the ribbon and opens the text. His eyes flick to the seal and then back to you. Recognition. Approval. You remember the time you forgot your ring at home before a public ritual. You'd left in a rush, slept badly, probably too much wine the night before, and only noticed the absence of weight on your finger when you reached the altar. Panic. You borrowed a ring from a client. He was a nobody. His seal featured a crude vine wrapped around a sword. Not exactly subtle, but it worked. The priests didn't question it. You made it through the ritual. Barely. Still, you think about that day every time your ring taps against a scroll. You don't forget it now. Ever. The ritual continues. The sacrifice, a spotless white lamb, is led forward. You try not to watch the moment the knife flashes. The priest examines the entrails. Frowns slightly. That's never good. He mutters something to his assistant, The assistant glances toward your group. For a heartbeat, you wonder if someone's toga is incorrectly folded. There's precedent. One senator had to redo an entire blessing because a priest noticed his stripe was flipped inside out. The gods apparently notice these things. The lamb's omens are red, slightly unfavorable. There's murmuring. One tribune shifts nervously in his sandals. You remain still, because in these moments posture is as important as prayer. You're not just a politician, you're a vessel of Roman decorum. And your ring, your toga, they prove your authority to stand beside the sacred fire. You remember another ritual back when you were new? Nervous. Your vestiplicus had wrapped your toga too tight across the chest, and when you went to kneel, the whole right side collapsed in a woolen avalanche. You barely caught the fold before it smothered the fire. You were laughed at for days. Now everything is tighter, neater, practiced. The priest blesses the gathering. Smoke billows. You make the sign with your hand raising your ring finger as tradition dictates. The ring catches the last beam of sunlight before vanishing into shadow. You don't believe in everything these rituals claim to do. You've seen enough bad omens ignored and good omens faked to doubt the purity of the process. But still, you believe in the power of belief, in how people react, in how they remember. A senator who fidgets in a ritual is mocked. A senator who forgets his seal is shamed. A senator who appears bored during a prayer might find his villa accidentally rezoned for new aqueducts. You whisper the final blessing in rhythm with the others, your voice low, your hand steady. Afterward, as you step back into the daylight, you feel the weight of the toga lift slightly in the breeze. A child watching from the edge of the crowd points at your purple stripe and tugs his mother's sleeve. She whispers something, probably your name. Or maybe just senator. You don't smile. Not here. But you allow yourself a slight exhale because you didn't trip. You didn't forget the words. Your ring was in place. Your stripe was true. And in Rome, sometimes that's all it takes to keep the gods on your side. The curia doors creak shut behind you with a sound like a tired ox groaning, and you immediately feel it, that subtle shift in the air, thick with incense dust and something sharper rivalry. The Senate is in session, but today feels different, because Emperor Nero has arrived. He never just enters, he arrives. And with him comes a billow of perfume and the unmistakable rustle of purple. You glance across the chamber as he sweeps in his toga picta, trailing behind like a royal shadow, entirely purple, deep, saturated imperial. Gold thread sparkles along the edges, a statement so loud it could shout down Cicero himself if Cicero hadn't been very much dead. You sit straighter because that's what one does. Not out of respect, out of calculation. There's a moment barely perceptible when everyone stiffens in their seats. One or two senators touch their rings. Others tilt their heads just so, catching the best angle for acknowledgement, if and only if the emperor looks their way. The toga picta is supposed to be worn only during triumphs or sacred processions. Technically, but emperors? They play by different rules. They wear purple like it was their birthright, not a once-a-decade honor. And you, senator, wear your striped toga praetexta and remind yourself your purple stops at the stripe. Historians still argue whether the early emperors wore purple in defiance of custom or in fulfillment of a new one. Some sources call it a breach. Others say it was just Rome evolving. You think it was a flex. A very deliberate, theatrical, nobody dare tell me no kind of flex. Nero settles into his special seat, raised slightly forward, an inch higher than yours. That inch matters. Everything in this room is built on inches and implications. You remember the first time you saw an emperor in full purple. It was thrilling and infuriating. A textile declaration that some men don't need laws, they are the law. You adjust your own toga. Neat folds careful drape the purple stripe like a leash you wear proudly but know is still a leash. Your ring presses against your palm. At least, that's still yours. For now. Nero smiles dangerously and begins a monologue masquerading as a proposal. His voice is smooth, his phrasing theatrical. He references ancient virtues, the glory of Rome, the will of the gods. You almost miss the part about land seizures. Almost. Another senator clears his throat. Carefully, he dares to question a detail. Everyone shifts. Tension ripples through the room like a dropped scroll. You don't move, you don't blink, you definitely don't speak. Instead, you study the emperor's toga. It's cut differently, tailored, scandalously modern. It has hidden seam, shorter hem, even what looks like a clasp holding the shoulder in place. That's not just arrogance, that's efficiency. And in Rome, efficiency in clothing is practically sacrilegious. You once saw a traditionalist senator go into an actual sulk because someone shortened their toga by a single pleat. He spent the next session dramatically rearranging his folds like a mourning widow. But Nero wears his gold-stitched purple like a second skin. And what can you do? You're a senator. You can huff about tradition, but you can't outdress an emperor. Still, the rest of you try. You glance down the chamber. Some senators have widened their stripes in quiet rebellion. Others have switched from dull wool to brighter, almost luminous weaves. A few are wearing rings inset with rare stones, agate lapis, even one with what looks like a carved pearl. It's like a fashion war disguised as legislation. You smile barely, because you've played this game long enough to know how the rules bend. The emperor speaks of unity, but his clothes shout supremacy. Your clothes, though, they whisper something more subversive, because under all this drapery you know the secret even emperors must pretend. The purple, the gold, the throne, it's a costume too. And everyone in this chamber is an actor hoping to outlast the play. You make eye contact with a senator across the aisle. He raises one eyebrow. You lower your chin. A silent exchange. Yes, we see the purple. Yes, we remember the law. No, we won't say it aloud. At the end of the session, Nero rises. Everyone stands. A breath is held, and then release. He sweeps out entourage in tow robes rippling like a stage curtain drawn shut. You exhale slowly. You sit again. Your own toga settles around you, heavy, humble, lawful. And in that moment, you realize something comforting. The emperor's purple may dazzle, but it will fade. Your stripe endures. It's raining now. Not the dramatic thunderclap kind, just the slow, constant drizzle that makes the forum smell like damp limestone and wet politics. You stand beneath a portico surrounded by men wrapped in dark wool. No purple today. No clean white folds. No glinting rings catching sunlight. This is a Senate gathering under duress, and the dress code has shifted accordingly, because Rome is in crisis. You're wearing the toga pulla, the mourning toga made of coarse, darkened wool. No dyes, no shine, no symbolism beyond sorrow. You didn't choose it. None of you did. The Senate declared a period of public mourning, and with it, the color palette of power changed overnight. It's a strange feeling being wrapped in something that looks like your own shadow. The weight is the same, but it feels heavier. Maybe it's the color. Maybe it's the occasion. Maybe it's the knowledge that no amount of fabric can cover what Rome has just lost. A fire, a betrayal, a battle gone very, very badly. The rumors vary, but the weight of them is in every soaked hem. Historians still argue whether the toga pulla was originally a sign of mourning protest or both. Some sources describe senators wearing it not just after death, but during national unrest, during famines, after political assassinations, or when a law passed that was so appalling they wanted to dress like the republic itself had died. Today you're wearing it for all three reasons. You look around. The men beside you are silent. Even the junior senators aren't whispering. One man's ring is missing, perhaps left behind on purpose. That's a statement too. Stripped down, unadorned, letting the black wool speak for him. Yours is still on, simple as ever, dull against the fabric, but you're aware of it, almost too aware. It doesn't belong with this outfit. It's a slash of gold in a sea of grief. You consider removing it, just for today. But no, you leave it, because grief is still power, and power needs a seal. You move toward the curia. It's quieter than usual. No fanfare, no posturing, no dramatic folds. Just the rustle of wet wool and the slap of rain-soaked sandals. Even the lictors guarding the door seem subdued, their fasces angled downward instead of upright. Inside the chamber is dim. The torches haven't been lit. Your eyes adjust slowly, but the outlines of your colleagues emerge one by one, dark-robed, still resigned. It looks less like a Senate session and more like a funeral. And in a way, it is. You sit on the cold marble bench, your robe heavy with rain. The wool smells like smoke and sheep and something older, something funereal. You haven't worn this toga since your father died. You hoped not to wear it again so soon, but Rome decides. The consuls speak. The tribunes nod. The topic isn't new policy, it's stability. How to project it. How to dress it. How to perform it. Even now there's debate over whether the mourning should be extended another week. One senator argues that continuing to wear black sends the wrong message, that it makes Rome look weak. Another says that taking it off too soon dishonors the dead. Both have a point. You say nothing. You just listen. Watch the folds. Count the rings. Because here's something no one admits out loud. Crisis fashion is dangerous. In moments like this, how you dress can hint at rebellion or at loyalty. If you leave off the ring, you may seem humble or subversive. If you keep the stripe hidden beneath black, you may seem prudent or ashamed. It's a tightrope walk across a storm. You remember an old tale how during the days of Sulla, a senator wore his usual toga while the rest of the Senate mourned. He claimed ignorance. The next day, he was found floating in the Tiber, the wool still bright against the water. Message received. You run your thumb along the edge of your own ring. Still there. Still firm. Still yours. You speak when called calm, neutral, offering logistical clarity on grain shipments and temple repairs. Nothing provocative. Nothing poetic. Just enough to remind them you're steady. And when the session ends, no one lingers. You step out into the rain again. The wool clings. The hem is filthy. You don't care. You glance up at the Capitoline Hill. The clouds are thick, but you think you see a sliver of light behind them. It might just be the reflection off someone's seal. Or it might be nothing. You pass a statue of Roma goddess symbol city. Even the sculpted folds of her robe seem darker today. And then you make your way home, shoes squelching ring cold against your skin, black wool dragging like a long breath drawn in grief. Tomorrow, maybe the sun will return. Maybe the stripe will reappear. But today, you wear Rome's sadness on your back. The day begins with a soft knock on the villa gate, a hesitant rhythm that makes your stomach twist before your mind catches up. No courier knocks like that. No slave. Not a friend. It's the knock of someone delivering bad news. You open the door yourself, which already feels like a mistake. A young boy stands there, tunic damp from dew, holding a scroll. He doesn't meet your eyes. He bows, runs. The scroll is sealed. Your ring hovers over the wax, and for a moment you hesitate. The emblem pressed there is familiar too familiar. You press your ring beside it not to open, but to compare. The angle, the depth, the width of the border. It matches. You open it. And then you sit, because the letter doesn't ask anything. It doesn't threaten. It simply states. A quiet, formal announcement of accusation, disloyalty, subversion, plotting against the state, and the seal on it. It's yours. Not just one like yours. Not a forgery. Yours. You feel the air shrink. You stare at your hand, at the ring that has defined you for decades. And now, apparently, it has also signed your name to a crime. You retrace every step in your mind. You never removed it. You never lent it. It never left your skin. And yet, here is a message with your seal on it, claiming you spoke words you never said and promised things you never agreed to. You've been set up. Historians still argue whether high-level political frame-ups like this were common or the stuff of dramatic exaggeration. But you know better. You've seen too many senators disappear not by vote or violence, but by ink and wax and silence. You rise, slowly, carefully. Your toga freshly folded is suddenly suffocating. The wool feels tighter. Your ring feels heavier. You summon your vestiplicus. Prepare my simplest toga, you say. He blinks. The virilis senator, you nod. The toga virilis, the plain white one given to boys becoming men. You haven't worn it in decades. Wearing it now, it's a statement. A stripping down of status. A silent claim, I am nothing but a citizen. It's dangerous, and it's your only option. When you arrive at the forum, heads turn. You see it immediately, the confusion, the calculations. You're not wearing your purple stripe. You're not wearing your ring. Only the most observant will notice that the absence is the message. You're declaring innocence by dressing like someone who has nothing to hide. But of course, in Rome, a man with nothing to hide is often assumed to be hiding everything. You remember the senator who tried this once before Tullius accused of bribery. He removed his ring, wore the plain toga, and stood in the forum weeping. He was acquitted, then murdered 3 days later. You step up to the rostra. Your voice is steady, but inside you feel like a man walking across ice. You speak of loyalty, of legacy, of reputation. You name no names. You shout no denials. You only show them no seal, no stripe, no show. And then you walk away. Back at your villa, the silence is thick enough to drink. Later, a friend visits. Close, trusted, or so you thought. He tells you quietly that the seal on the false message was pressed into old wax, remelted, softened, lifted, reused. It's been done before. That's how they got you. You stare at your ring now sitting in a small ivory box, a symbol of authority, and now a liability, a weapon turned against its owner. You wonder if it's safer never to wear it again. But you know better. In Rome, a man without a seal is no man at all. A senator without a stripe is a ghost. So the next morning you dress again. The toga praetexta returns. Your ring slides back onto your finger. The fit is tighter, as if your hand knows what it's doing is dangerous. You walk through the forum slower than before, measured, aware of every gaze. Someone tried to kill you with your own name, but you're still here. And your ring, it leaves sharper impressions now. The sandals are scuffed, the wool is creased, and the forum is quieter than usual. You walk differently today, not just because your left knee aches, though it does, but because you've made a decision. A small one, really. Hardly worth mentioning. You're not wearing your toga. Instead, you wear a tunic plain, unbelted, clean, but utterly casual. It's not illegal. You're not breaking any law. But you might as well be. Heads turn. Eyebrows lift. A merchant blinks twice and steps out of your way as if your lack of wool somehow makes you contagious. This is what rebellion looks like in Rome. No banners, no torches, just a senator in a tunic. Of course you're not the first to do this. You remember hearing whispers about a Senator Servius Falco who showed up to a vote in nothing but sandals and a tunic dyed deep green. He claimed it was laundry day. He claimed his toga had caught fire on a temple candle. He claimed a lot of things. But what he meant was, I am tired of playing the woolen game. Historians still argue whether these so-called toga refusals were genuine protests or just eccentric fashion choices. Some say they were expressions of disgust with the Senate's growing corruption. Others think they were calculated bids for public support. and attempt to appear more of the people. You're just tired. The toga praetexta itches. The fold that crosses under your arm makes it nearly impossible to scratch your ribs without appearing undignified. The shoulder drape falls constantly. The hem picks up street filth like it's being paid. And today, after weeks of rumors and threats and wax-based betrayal, you simply don't have it in you. So you show up like this. And the city notices. A junior senator stops in his tracks. Are you ill? He asks, eyes darting as if a tunic were contagious. Just airing out, you reply. You take your seat at the edge of the rostra steps. Not in the curia. Not under the arches where the full-draped elite sip honeyed wine and judge each other's creases. Here on bare marble tunics sticking slightly to your back you sit. And breathe. You still wear your ring. You always wear the ring. Because even in rebellion, even in plain linen, the seal matters. It whispers, don't confuse comfort for surrender. And of course, there are murmurs. A pair of equestrians pause nearby pretending to examine a public inscription. They're not reading it. They're reading you. You remember a poet who once said Rome was built on whispers, not stones. You believed it then. You live it now. One man, bold or foolish, approaches. Senator, he says, voice careful, will you be dressing formally for the vote tomorrow? You smile. Depends on the weather. He blinks. It's not the answer he expected, but it's the answer you gave. Because now you understand something deeper. The toga isn't the Senate. It isn't Rome. It isn't even you. It's a costume in a never-ending play. And sometimes, to make them notice the actor, you have to walk on stage wearing something else. There's risk, of course. One Senator Clodius, years ago, refused to wear his toga for an entire season. Claimed it was symbolic of Rome's grief, or exhaustion, or something. The Senate fined him, then barred him, then eventually invited him back when they realized the crowd liked him better in sandals. You're not trying to make a statement that grand. You're not burning anything. You're just adjusting the script. And it feels good. You stroll through the forum, arms, unencumbered shoulders, free. You stop at a fountain and don't worry about your hem dipping into the basin. You sit on a bench and cross your legs without dislodging a shoulder fold. You walk into a bakery and don't feel the pressure of 100 pleats whispering, stand noble. But it's not all freedom. A client hesitates before approaching. A fellow senator refuses to make eye contact. One man sees your ring and assumes it's counterfeit. The absence of your toga speaks louder than any speech you could give. It says, I know the rules. I've followed them. And today, I choose not to. Later, as the sun lowers and the shadows grow long across the temple of Saturn, you spot a scribe sketching the forum. He glances up at you, then down at his wax tablet. You wonder if he draws you with a toga anyway, just to keep the image clean. You wonder how history will remember this day. Will they say you made a silent protest? Will they say you had nothing left to lose? Or will they simply say, this was the day the wool slipped and Rome blinked? You don't know. But you do know this: tomorrow you may dress in full folds again. You may step back into the role. But today your tunic is enough, and your ring still seals just fine. The chamber is dim-hushed, far too quiet for comfort. The usual echo of sandals on marble is muted today. Too many togas, too many secrets. You step inside, and even though no one turns to look, you feel the eyes. This is not a day for speeches. This is a day for deals, not the kind etched into law or announced from the rostra. No, this is a different theater, one performed behind colonnades, whispered through side halls, etched not in stone, but sealed in wax and hidden in sleeves. You know the drill. You invented half of it. Your toga is spotless. Not just clean spotless. You spent an hour with your vestiplicus ensuring the folds lay sharp. The purple stripe bold, the weight perfectly balanced on your left shoulder. The message is clear. I am not here to hide. But that's exactly what you're doing. Because in Rome, sometimes the only way to be seen is to pretend you're not doing anything at all. You sit beside Senator Crispus. His ring catches the light onyx black as the underworld set in silver. Too grim for daytime wear, which makes it perfect for what's about to happen. You nod once. He shifts barely, slides a small scroll toward you beneath the folds of his toga. You glance at it. No wax seal. Just a ribbon gray, loose unassuming. It says, "This message doesn't exist unless you choose to believe it does." You tuck it away. Later, a junior senator approaches. He smiles too widely. His ring is new, probably a gift from a wealthy uncle. The seal isn't even broken in yet. It glints with the enthusiasm of a man who doesn't know how quickly enthusiasm gets buried in this city. He bows slightly. "Senator, if I may, your opinion on the allocation." You lift your ring hand. Slowly. A pause. Then lower it again. He nods and retreats. He understands. That's the language of the chamber. Not Latin, not Greek. Gesture. The tilt of a ring. The angle of a toga fold. The order in which you greet your peers. A tap of fingers against marble during another's speech. A glance at the clerks when someone mentions a name that should not be written down. Historians still argue whether the backroom deals of the Senate were truly clandestine, or just formalities draped in pretense. Some say most policy was worked out in private long before it was presented to the people. Others claim the public debates were still vital. But you've sat in too many of these rooms, heard too many whispers sealed before they were spoken. The letter you received earlier is still unread in your sleeve. You know what it contains. Not the words, but the shape, a proposal, a favor, a price. Later tonight, you'll take it out warm, the wax press your ring. Or you won't. That's the real power, not saying yes, not saying no, but holding your answer in wax for as long as you like. You rise from your seat. Not abruptly, just enough to signal this conversation is over and you are not invited to continue it. You walk the perimeter of the chamber, trailing your hand along the cold marble balustrade. You stop at the statue of Concordia. She holds her hand out open, inviting empty. Once in jest, a colleague pressed his ring against the palm of the statue. "Just sealing the peace," he said. The next week he vanished. Even jokes carry weight here. You make your way into the side hall where two senators are murmuring over a map. Grain shipments, ship routes, bribes. You can't hear the words, but the body language says enough. They straighten as you approach. One gestures to a place near the coast, Ostia maybe. The other smiles faintly. "Would you consider advising?" You don't reply. You lift your ring, turn it inward, and let them see the seal. They nod. One of them slides a tiny scroll your way. No names, no date. Just figures and a wax smudge. You walk away without touching it, because power is not in having all the deals. It's in deciding which ones you pretend not to notice. Later, as you return to your villa, your hand brushes the ring again. It's warm from your skin, smooth at the edges, but still sharp at the center, your seal, your weapon, your voice. You think about how many messages are out there with your seal on them, promises you kept, promises you broke, and promises you never even read. You think about how many letters you've sealed that say one thing and mean another, and you wonder when all is said and done what's stronger, the man or the mark he leaves behind. You're standing very, very still. The sculptor has just tapped your nose with his thumb and is now stepping back, head tilted, trying to decide whether to chisel the furrow in your brow or pretend you've aged more gracefully than you have. You're not allowed to speak. Not that you could really, your jaw is clenched and your shoulders are locked into the same pose they've held for nearly half an hour. The folds of your toga praetexta have been arranged and rearranged at least 4 times each time, with fresh commentary on how the cloth must reflect your dignity. Your back is beginning to cramp. You cannot move. This apparently is immortality. The marble bust will stand in the family atrium later, perhaps in the basilica, maybe even if you're ambitious enough in a public space. But none of that matters if your stripe droops or your ring isn't visible. So here you are, arm raised in a rhetorical gesture you don't recall ever using in real life. Ring hand positioned just so near the fold of your chest. It's not comfortable. But like everything else in Rome, it's not supposed to be. Statues are for showing, not feeling. Historians still argue whether Roman portraiture was idealized or brutally honest. Some say these busts were stylized PR campaigns. Others claim every wrinkle was carved deliberately to emphasize gravitas. You personally requested that the frown lines be kept. Makes you look serious, wise, slightly disappointed in everyone. The toga, though, that's a different matter. The sculptor has already adjusted the shoulder drape twice, trying to make the marble look like it's caught in motion-frozen dignity. He even asked if you'd prefer the stripe to be more visible than accurate. You said yes. Of course you did. Because 100 years from now, someone will look at this statue and decide, based on the folds alone, whether you were worth remembering. You shift. Slightly. Too slightly. The sculptor groans. Back to the elbow, he says. The angle's wrong now. You resist the urge to throw him into a cistern. Instead, you glance down only with your eyes at the reference sketch lying nearby. There it is, your ring centered prominently. Not because you insisted, but because he knows. That ring matters. It's the visual anchor. It tells the viewer this man had the power to seal Rome's future in wax. You remember the first time you saw your father's statue. His hand-raised toga swept across his chest ring, subtly visible at the wrist. As a boy, you didn't understand why the marble glimmered. Now you do. It wasn't the polish. It was the weight of history condensed into a loop of gold. You exhale slowly, nostrils flaring. Behind you, an assistant carefully carves the base name lineage offices held. He mutters under his breath as he writes. The titles are long. You've accumulated more than you thought. Each one earned in wool and wax. You wonder who will walk past this bust when you're gone. Will they read the inscription, or just glance at the stripe and assume you're another stiff-old senator who spent too long posing? Will they understand the choices in the drape, the tilt of the chin, the prominence of the seal? Or will they just point at the ring and ask, was he important? You want to laugh, because that's the truth of it. Everything you've worn, carried, and endured, 7 meters of wool, an aching shoulder, and a ring that cut into your finger during winter, all of it now lives in this hunk of marble. And the marble will last longer than you ever could. The sculptor finally steps back and nods. We'll finish from sketches, he says. You may lower your arm. You do. Blood rushes back into your fingers. Your ring shifts slightly on the joint. You flex your hand. Will the seal be carved in full detail, you ask? Of course, he says. It must be accurate. You nod. You don't thank him. That would seem needy. Later, you walk the forum and pass other statues. Some you know. Some are older, worn by rain and pigeon droppings, faces, faded names half erased. One bust has had its nose replaced badly. Another has had the ring entirely chiseled off. You wonder if that man was disgraced, or simply forgotten. Back at your villa, you open a scroll and stamp it with your ring. The wax hisses as always. You press, hold, release. The image is perfect. You look at the seal, then at your hand. Then you imagine it in stone, cold, forever. And for the first time in a while, you wonder, is this really how you want to be remembered? The street is quiet, too quiet for Rome. You walk slowly, your sandals scuffing gently along worn stones that have carried centuries of ambition. The air smells of olive wood smoke, damp wool, and something heavier, something ending. The Senate is still there, of course. The Curia still stands. Statues still frown from their pedestals. But the weight has changed. The fabric has loosened. And as you pass a shopkeeper folding plain tunics onto a shelf where togas once hung, you feel it, the unraveling. Not all at once. Not in fire and trumpets. In silence. In absence. You're still wearing your toga today. The pretexta, as always, freshly brushed, the stripes still bold. but fewer people notice. Fewer people know what it means. You nod to a group of younger men lounging on the basilica steps. Only one returns the nod. The others look confused. One whispers, probably asking if you're a priest. You keep walking, because today you're doing what no senator ever wants to admit they do. You're visiting the tailor, not for a new toga, for something simpler. Something after. The shop is smaller than you remember. Or maybe the doorway has shrunk with your pride. Inside, the air smells of old cloth and newer intentions. The tailor greets you. He doesn't call you senator, just nods, offers you a seat. You sit. I need a travel cloak, you say. He nods again. Wool. You hesitate. Linen, you reply. For warmer places. There it is. Not a resignation. Not exactly. But an acknowledgement. The kind that comes when you know the curtain is closing and you'd rather pack your own bags than be asked to leave. Historians still argue when the end of the traditional toga came. Some say it never truly ended, it just faded. Others claim there was a precise moment when senators stopped dressing like senators and started dressing like survivors. You wonder which you'll be remembered as. The tailor measures you quickly, respectfully. You notice his hands don't brush the ring on your finger. He sees it, but he doesn't ask about it. Maybe he's seen too many like it. Maybe he used to make seals himself back when people still sent messages on tablets and not on whispers. You leave with the cloak folded under your arm. Not a gift, not a ritual, just a piece of fabric for walking away in. You stop once more at the forum. It's thinner now, fewer debates, fewer clients. The statues remain, but the faces have dulled. Yours among them. You see your own marble eyes from a distance and wonder if they're judging you or forgiving you. You wear your toga a few hours longer, enough to be seen, enough to let it breathe one last time in Roman air. Then in the quiet of your villa you undress. No slaves this time, no vestiplicus, just you and your memory of how the folds work. Your hands fumble at first, then remember. The wool loosens, falls away, and you fold it deliberately, tenderly, as if wrapping up a former self. You place it in a cedar-lined chest. Next to other relics scrolls tablets, a dried wax seal that once held together a letter you never sent. The ring. You hesitate. You twist it once, then again. And then you leave it on. Because even if you never seal another law, never raise another motion, never walk the curious steps again, you earned this. You dim the oil lamp and pull the cloak over your shoulders. Lighter, easier, less Roman, but warmer. Outside, the stars blink awake, unimpressed by your internal monologue. You walk into the night, into the hills, into wherever men like you go when the Senate no longer sees them, but the city still remembers. Because Rome always remembers, even when the wool is gone, even when the ring is cold, even when your name fades to dust, something remains. The silence of marble folds, the shadow of a stripe, the echo of a ring pressed into wax. You carry them with you, and they carry you back. You're far from the Senate now. The forum is behind you, the marble halls silent, the scrolls sealed, the wax cooled. You walk slowly. There's no urgency anymore. The path ahead is not marked by laws or politics, but by the soft rustle of leaves and the faint hoot of an owl somewhere in the distance. You feel the night air on your skin, cooler than you expected, familiar, calming. The wool is gone, but its weight still lingers, not as a burden, but as a memory, a comforting one maybe. Like a story you once told over and over until the words stopped needing to be spoken. You look at your hands. One still bears the ring. And though you no longer raise it in chambers or press it into wax, it still holds meaning. Proof of the life you lived. The power you once wielded. The stories now stored quietly behind your eyes. The stars look the same as they always have. They ask nothing of you. They simply shine. You sit by a small stone wall. Rest your hands in your lap. Listen to the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. Then silence again. Your breathing slows. Your shoulders soften. There's nothing left to decide tonight. No speeches to give. No decisions to make. Just rest. You close your eyes and let it all drift away. The wool, the marble, the whispers, the weight. You are still, and Rome like sleep holds you gently now.